Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and I have spent the last 24 years as both the CEO of Technology Partners and as the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. I'm delighted to have Lisa Hu on the show today. Lisa is the founder and CEO of Lux Nyx. If you like this episode today, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. So, Lisa Hu,
Yes.
It is such a pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Something Extra podcast. I'm so delighted to have you as my guest today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's like talking to a kindred spirit here.
Absolutely. You and I, we've been in a lot of the same rooms for years, but I'm just excited to dig into your story today. I know that it's going to be helpful for our listeners. I know they're going to come away inspired after listening to this. So let's just dig right in. You weren't born in the United States. You were born in China.
Yes.
But I think you came to the U.S. when you were 6. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Where did you grow up? I don't know.
Actually, in a very small fisherman's town. So the likelihood of someone coming out of that town to the United States and making a career is probably pretty slim. There's actually nobody else in St. Louis from that town.
Wow.
So that's just to give you an idea. Yeah. I don't know if people know a little bit about history. They've heard of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, which meant a lot of people got sent from the city to the countryside to live and start a farm or just contribute back to the country, right? And so my parents, they kind of met in that setting. They started to have a family and had me, and being born in that kind of setting also is interesting because also back then there was a lot of weird cultural unspoken rules, like the male is the more treasured or more superior gender, I suppose. So you see this change in gender disparity in China right now as there's more male than female. It's partially contributed to that. And born under that setting, my parents were, slightly, I don't want to say disappointed, but they were, if you could dig up pictures of me from when I was 1 year old, I look like a little tomboy, my haircut, it wasn't like they said, oh, we prefer a boy, but also the way they dressed me, it was mom and pop. Okay, what's going on here? This is not Bradley Pitt, Angelina Jolie, where the kids actually get to choose. I didn't choose this look. So born under that kind of setting, I kind of always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, wanting to prove that, females are just as good as the other gender. Of course, now, as an adult, I'm yeah, of course, it's so obvious. But when you're growing up in that kind of setting, you just can't help but feel oh, well, I'm not good enough, when you're a kid.
A little bit less than.
Yeah. And it became obvious because I had I don't know if we want to go into that much detail, but I had a cousin who was, we only have one male cousin in kind of my generation. And at the end of the day, my grandparents kind of catered to him. But then I'm hey, look, I have better grades. Anything that, an Asian parent wanted was me. And as a kid, you don't understand why. You just know that it is. And that feeling drove me to want to excel in areas that I could get validation from the adults. But even then, it was, like, constant, right?
Constantly having to prove yourself.
Right, right, constantly. So that was kind of the setting that I grew up in, and fast forward, my father went to SLU, got his PhD, and a year in, he brought me and my mother here to the States. And so I was 6 years old coming here as first generation immigrant. That was pretty tough. Again, 6 years old, you know absolutely nothing. You don't know how the world works. And, you know, we came here. My father, he was delivering pizza on the side. And then my mother was working in a Chinese restaurant. So I would either stay home by myself at 6 years old. I don't know. Like I should probably shouldn't put this on record, but like it happened, you know. I
Wow.
remember there were things that, you know, as a kid, again, you accept. You're like, okay, I'm eating frozen McDonald's for dinner. That's normal. Put it in the microwave, you know, take care of myself. And then also, you know, like I would take a food stamp and go and get lunch every single day. You know, I didn't have anything special like all the other parents, like all the other kids had like a special lunch that their parents packed. And, you know, I'm taking a ticket, yellow ticket, I remember. And then, you know, I get a ticket stub every month or something like that, pack of them. And then I get to get lunch. But as a kid, you're like, you know, whatever. Like you don't realize these things. You don't like really think that you're different. So you accept it and then you're just kind of moving on with your life. But growing up feeling like you had to overachieve and then also then you grow up and you come to the States and you're still like considered poor, right? Like I mean, I don't want to beat around the bush about that, but it was like, yeah, we were poor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I was like using tickets to get lunch, yeah, that probably means something. Yeah, and then feeling like, you know, these other kids have something like their parents are giving them attention and stuff like that. And then here I am, like trying to figure it all out, and no one's here to guide me. So, fast forward, that's kind of the setup that teed me up for okay, I need to excel.
It teed you up for who you are and who you are to be. I mean, those things were hard, Lisa. Let's don't sugarcoat it. That was so hard,
Yeah.
but you've gone on to accomplish so much, and now you're helping other women step into that as well. And so I love that. But, you went back to China then, I think from the time you were like 10 to 14
Yeah.
and stayed with your grandmother,
Yes.
right? And then you came back to the States, and I want to kind of dig into this a little bit because this really made me sad. You came back to the States and now it's high school time, and you said coming back to the States, you felt really invisible. You said you were constantly trying to figure out, how do I blend in with the
It
crowd?
wasn't strange to the high schoolers then, but it was strange to me because the back and forth was very culturally different. So in Asia, you have to get good grades to become popular. And then being in band makes you more popular. So I come back to the States and I'm like, hey, I have good grades. I want to be the teacher's pet. And also, is there a band that I can join? And then, you know, fast forward, you learn like, okay, that
Lame. I mean, the kids think that's lame, right?
I
But
grew up in the period of the stereotypical, like, American Pie movie period where, like, the jocks, the cheerleaders, and I'm the awkward band person slash good grades, like, geek. You know, all those stereotypes really doesn't matter, you know, in the end, but, like, once again, I come back, you know, and then it's like I'm still trying to figure it out, like, how do I fit in? Like, who am I, right? So I think it was those were things that, you know, over time I've just like learned to have to accept it. It's added to a layer of like resilience for me just because I'm like things don't really get to me because I've just been through so much and had to accept it and just be like, "Oh, okay, another change. Okay."
you got to embrace it. If you can't change it, embrace it, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it's both gave me a lot of the ability to just take things in, but also the downside of that is like not be able to have a emotional bond with people because I wasn't able to express, you know, how I felt or how those situations, you know, did anything to me because you know, in my head, I'm just like, let's just suck it up. Let's move on, you know, and that carried into my adult life. And, you know, I also excelled in corporate and everything like that. But a lot of that was unempathetic. That might be the best way to describe it,
Right.
as I became black and white versus understanding like and being more fluid with life in general. And it wasn't until I started my own business and getting through some of these, like really truly looking at myself and starting exploring myself that I realized like, hey, even when I was in corporate, even when I was like on the surface excelling, it was really perception of like wanting people to believe
That you were worth it and that yeah, were good enough.
yeah, that I was worth it. So I wasn't actually living for myself. And so that was a big revelation, probably even just in the past like year and a half. But it's been a really cool journey.
You took all of that, and we've already said it. I mean, you were constantly proving yourself, and you You said you were like the model child. You got a master's from Mizzou. Then you went on to WashU to get your MBA. You started, I think, your career at EY. Then you went to Sigma Aldrich. I mean, you were doing amazing in corporate. In fact, I think you were a director when you were just 30 years old, which was kind of unheard of. You were making six figures. You're working on your MBA, but you started sewing as a hobby.
I wasn't very good at it. I have to fully admit, but I wanted this bag, right? Like I was looking for this bag that I was like, oh, it doesn't exist. Maybe I should learn how to sew to make it myself. How hard could this be? I mean, I've done so much already so far, perception wise, it seems like, oh, I've done so much. Everything I've set my mind to, I've done. And so I was like, making bags should be easy peasy. I didn't know how to do it, so I just started reaching out to. I think my first mentor was from Score, someone that made production before, that made baby carriages, and I was like, "How do you make a product? What do you do?" And she was like, "You literally just take whatever you can find, make the first prototype." So I used literally cardboard box, some scrap fabric my mother had, and then found her sewing machine that was so old. In fact, I broke it when I was trying to make my first prototype, and yeah, I just made it. It's somewhere, sitting somewhere. I probably should dig it up. So I did. I learned how to sew. I quickly realized that this was not scalable. Yeah.
Right. Here's the deal. You were living the corporate world, you're traveling all the time. And when entrepreneurs kind of jump on that wagon, one of two things. You're either seeing there's a gap, there's nothing that's existed like this, so you go out and create, or there is something that exists, but it's just not quite right, and you improve on something. And so for you just saw that there was this gap, and you said you would be corporate world during the day, and then you would want to go hang with your friends at night, and you just didn't have this bag that met all these needs. So that's where the idea was born, and I love it. And you launched Lux Nyx. What year was that, Lisa, again, that you launched the company?
It took me longer to prepare for the launch, but the idea came in 2017 and I launched the business in 2018. So 17, I was still kind of in corporate. And then I started to just becoming fascinated with the idea of creating a product. And, I was going through a lot of personal discovery and hardships during that time. So even though on the surface, everything was just perfect from a perception perspective, but internally I was like, I need to figure out who I am. What do I want to do? What's my purpose? And then also I just got done with my MBA at the time at WashU. I was doing evening MBA, and I was like, I have all this time in my hands. What do I do with it? Of course, because you just took off an MBA. Or okay, fine, more things on my plate. Busy mind, right?
Don't rest. Don't even think about resting for a while.
Right. No, rest? What? So I started on this project, and one thing led to another. I was like, oh, this is fun. This is interesting. And there was a challenge, at every single step of the way. Now, looking back on it, there has been so many challenges that if I were to tell me from 2017, hey, you're about to embark on a journey that is full, potholes, and, this road really needs to be repaired, badly, it's falling apart, I might not have done it. But in a way, I'm glad that I didn't have someone telling me how hard it is, because ignorance is kind of bliss. You start first step and you're like, oh, I solved this, no problem. You get a little win and then move on to the next thing, another little win, and it builds momentum.
Yes.
And then by the time you're too far in, you're like, oh, I can't turn back now. I love this, but also this is torture.
There's so much here that I want to continue to talk about. I want to talk about the meaning of Lux Nyx, and then here's the thing, and here's what I want our listeners to understand too. It has not been without its obstacles. You actually went to over 40 manufacturers.
Yeah, probably more than that if you count the number of ones that I tried to actually ask questions and stuff like that. But personally, yeah, I went through over 40.
When I talk to young people, I a lot of times will tell them the story of Walt Disney, that he went to over 500 banks before he found one that would finance Disney World, or Disneyland.
I didn't even hear that story, but I'm not surprised by that.
Yes. But just think, if he had stopped at 499.
Might not have Walt Disney these days. Yeah.
If he had given up at 499, we may not have Disney. So anyway, we've got so much more to talk about, but we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Lisa Hu.
Are you a rising IT leader? Could you benefit from a network of like-minded peers? Let me introduce you to the St. Louis Technology Leadership Experience. This one-of-a-kind program gathers cohorts of IT professionals for 3 workshops: pure small group problem solving, one-on-one mentoring by IT executives, and multiple networking events. You'll be prepared for your next steps as an IT leader by gaining core leadership competencies and a strong, powerful network of peers. To apply for our next TechLX cohort, visit tpi.co/TLX.
So welcome back to the Something Extra podcast with Lisa Hu. So Lisa, you founded Lux Nyx. Tell our listeners, where did the name come from?
So Lux Nyx, it's Greek for light and night. If I mentioned Highway 40, I basically drove down Highway 40 and saw this like beautiful pink sunset. And I was like, it's got to be named after something about transition. I'm thinking about leaving corporate America to potentially start a business. I was also personally, I was doing a lot of self-discovery. I was going through a separation with my ex-husband. And so that was very, very emotionally deep and heavy at the time too. So, and then I'm thinking like, what is the purpose of my life? I feel like I've lived a life that was for perception, right? We keep going back to that, but it was for other people. And so, I was constantly asking myself, like, what am I doing? I've just kind of accepted versus really asking that hard question, which is, who am I? I was 30 at the time. Like, I'm asking that question, who am I? What is my purpose in life? And so it was not only the physical manifestation of what I was doing of like getting out of corporate into potentially a new business, fashion design in this case, complete 180, very different.
Yeah, you were corporate finance.
Yes. Yes.
What in the world did you know about fashion? You really didn't. It was not like
I was a good dresser. That was about it.
Yeah.
I thought that justified me to become a fashion designer. So yeah, and like it was funny because I had a meeting with my ex-boss at the time, and his name is Michael. He was like, "Who's poaching you? Where are you going?" And I'm like, "Nowhere." I'm like, "I'm starting my own business." He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Making handbags." He's like, "Do you know how to?" I'm like, "No."
No.
No, because at that time I haven't even I started looking for manufacturers, but I haven't really gone to like do the research. I don't even know how to make bags at that point. I just kind of went, and took a chance on myself.
I love your courage. I love your resilience, your grit, your vision. It takes courage. How many times, Lisa, do you see people like not go for something out of fear?
All the time.
And so like if you are not listening to that inner voice, you may never really step into your real purpose, right? And that was your whole journey. I love the Lux Nyx because I'm thinking, it's a transitional bag too, correct? Because you're going from the corporate, boardroom to out at night. It's eco-friendly, cruelty-free. There's a separate shoe compartment, which I absolutely love because how many times, like you're running to the airport and you're wanting to change into your flip-flops from your heels,
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Our backpack is still our hero product up until this point, and that was the bag that I designed at the time. Granted, I've definitely like created more products since, and I want to say like I've become better at designing products as well. But the very first bag was like, okay, like you can see clearly what I was thinking at the time. Like, hey, I am running between airports, you're right, meetings to meetings. And also like the front section even comes off as a clutch and crossbody. So you can actually use it for different occasions. That was me. I was just doing so much that I'm like, I need a bag that also looks good too. It looks like I can walk into a board meeting with that bag. And so those were kind of the details that went into the very first bag. And after that, it was just game on.
Going back to your roots, going back to the Asian culture and the way that you were brought up, taking that leap into the entrepreneurial world, leaving a 6-figure income, it was not just about that, right? Your mom, wonderful person, but she didn't really understand it.
Yeah, and to some extent, it's like, especially when I first launched Lux Nyx, it was to prove to my colleagues that publicly have seen, I like literally told all my friends I'm leaving corporate to start this, right? To like prove to them that I can be a great entrepreneur, prove to my mother that she was wrong, that I can get this company going and I was going to make like Boca bucks the next year. Of course, like a lot of things have happened since, including the whole pandemic. But that being said,
Sure, exactly.
I've learned a lot and the company is successful, but it wasn't without a lot of different tests. And also, I still have yet to garner my mother's approval on this. So I've gotten to a point where it's not for anyone else anymore. it's for me, it's for other women that were like me that are trying to grow their career and had to feel like they were less than because of their gender.
Yeah, and you have a bigger mission. I mean, we equip the rock star women with the tools that she needs to go places and make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
I love that. And so you're doing that for other women. But let me ask you this. Do you have some words of advice? I mean, you're a finance person, so you know about cash flow.
Cash is king.
Cash is king. You cannot overextend yourself. It's for those entrepreneurs, neural-minded people that are thinking out there, pay attention to your cash flow. The lean startup is a really great way to go. What other words of advice would you give, Lisa, to, a budding entrepreneur?
Don't underestimate how much work it takes, but also don't underestimate yourself. Because entrepreneurship, you're taking yourself out of a very structured environment in corporate or wherever else you come from, where it's like there is a process set to entrepreneurship. It's all dependent on you. It took a lot longer than I thought to really build the company and build the brand, but also it is 100% totally worth it. I said, hey, don't underestimate how long it takes because I want people to be mentally prepared to invest more time and realize that you do need more resources than you think. When I first budgeted, it was probably double or triple what I thought it would take to get the company going. But don't underestimate yourself because when you stop yourself from experiencing failure, that compounds. Growth compounds, stopping yourself from failure also compounds. So if you pull back on one thing, how many times are you going to let yourself pull back on things in the future? So that's one thing. And I think, one of the biggest things and one of the things that has really been transformative for me is, we talked a lot about how I was not able to emotionally share or have the conversations around being vulnerable and being able to share those stories and be able to have those conversations. It took a lot of work for me to get there. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of starting to get over that fear of telling people about my fears to ultimately get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I can fully say that I am authentically myself and I am having fun. And I remember when I was in corporate, I got the advice of like, as a woman, don't be emotional. That's how you can advance. Now I'm a fundamentally the opposite believer. I mean, don't throw a tantrum at work. I think
Right.
that's legitimate. Don't throw a tantrum at work, but sharing your vulnerabilities actually is a way to build and lead. It actually makes people trust you more as a leader.
I think it gives other people the permission, number one, to relate to you. You're relatable because you're a human. And then I think it gives them permission, right? Then to be their authentic self. And I agree.
I think people want to avoid problems, which by not being honest with each other, you're actually creating problems. Like it's not solving problems at its root. It's just, you're playing internal politics. And yeah, so I think being able to do that and also it is a way to make someone else feel supported too and building that trust thoroughly because especially if you're a leader and they can see like as a role model yourself to be candid and say like hey like you can be yourself at work that other person is going to feel so much more comfortable working with you especially in the nowadays right like people want to work in an environment where they feel like they're at ease like that doesn't mean you don't perform that just means you perform even better because you're at ease and you're having fun and when you have fun your productivity goes up.
That's good. That's so good.
I wasn't like that. I mean, I did well in corporate, but I wasn't like that. And I think the old me lacked a lot of that to become a true leader. And that is something I will recognize now. And I don't know. I mean, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
How much better of a leader could I have been if I had taken my own advice now, right? Back then.
I love that you're sharing that because maybe it'll help another person on their journey and maybe help them get there sooner.
Yeah. Your team would be stronger.
That's why I feel like it is so important for us to share our stories authentically like that because then other people can hear and go, wow, she's more like me than not like me, So, we've got so many more things. I wanted to talk about the power of connecting with other women. We have a technology leadership experience that we launched back in early 2019. And there's another group that we're a founding member for here in St. Louis called Inspire CIO. And one of their mantras, they said the answer is in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I've adopted that in other ways, even like with your team, the answer is in the room, but you've got to convene people, and kind of have that tribe. So I know that's important to you. You're so about empowering other women. Where has that played out for you? I mean, you haven't done this all alone. I'm sure you've had mentors, and I'm sure you've had people that have spoken into you for the last several years.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. And I don't know how many people have kind of experienced a dichotomy of what you believe in versus like your actual behaviors, but I've always believed in this because of my background. But the thing is, when I started Lux Nyx, I was in the first couple years. It wasn't completely smooth, but I was like trying so many different things, but I kept feeling like I was failing. And not only that, but I was like, this is something that I believe in. This is something that I want to empower other women to be able to be better or like, whatever it is that they believe in. But I didn't have close female friends. And that was like a moment, like a light bulb went off when that's when I started on my like kind of emotional discovery and trying to figure out what was going on with me. Cause up until that point, I was still living for other people. I was trying to pretend like I was this perfect entrepreneur. We were showing up as like we were successful when we were not at that point, I should say. I had to dig in and realize kind of goes back to my own childhood. There was a moment where I realized I had a half sister, my parents separated, and I didn't know that they were divorced until I saw a picture of my half sister. And then I think that had triggered a competitiveness against other women in my head.
Okay.
I know it all roots back to your childhood somehow, right? And then over time, I had friends, but I had a problem like emotionally bonding with them. I mean, these are all honest and frank things. And I think people all have their own demons. And this was my demon.
Yes.
I wasn't able to express my emotions. And on top of that, I was even more deathly afraid of expressing my emotions with other women, even though I fundamentally believe that women deserve to be on the same like plane as men. And I support that. And that's a business I'm growing. So I was chanting that, but fundamentally, I wasn't walking the walk. I was talking the talk. And like I thought I was walking the walk, but I wasn't. And that moment hit me like during COVID, actually. And post that moment, I've started to peel back all the layers of emotional complexity of not being able to communicate that, but also not being able to bond with other women on the level that I should be able to because my belief system fundamentally aligns with that. My actions did not because of all these like prior traumas that I had. And so I came around to that and I started to first like do the scary thing. I talked about separation with my ex. I started telling people because after that separation, I literally didn't talk to anyone for a year. I got a studio apartment and I didn't talk to anyone, no friends. None of who I thought were my close girlfriends even knew about it. I hid it from everyone because I was so ashamed of everything that was going on. I didn't know how to talk to them. So I finally had conversations with people, my friends, that I was saying, hey, this is a very hard thing for me to say, even though, now I'm looking back and they're just like, hey, we're just here for you. Even though it was something that had a big impact on my personal life, I didn't talk to my friends about it. So I opened up, and that has led me to build a deeper friendship with my friends. And the second thing is, I realized how important mentorship to other women was. And I started reaching out to other women that have been through it, or other women that are, steps above me in terms of or steps ahead of me in terms of entrepreneurship, and just saying, hey, can we chat? And like not only talking to them about my business problems, but also talking to them about like, here's an emotional thing that I'm trying to.
Yeah. Right.
And it's so funny because that opened up a whole new world for me. And, not only did it really get me to understand what my mission in life was, but really got me to understand how I can help other women to achieve the same thing because I had a hard time doing it myself. Like I remember going to like corporate women conferences way back when, and I felt particularly like everyone was very guarded. I'm not saying this about every single one, but I just remember looking back on those events I went to and I didn't really have a good time. I didn't enjoy it. Long story short, I've since like people have started inviting me to these like women conferences to speak and stuff like that. And during that, one of the key things I like basically mention is like have fun, be yourself, play, realize that the people around you are the people that you need to know. And the interesting thing is they don't know much about each other because we're not willing to shed who like the problems that they were having, to put the guard down, to say, hey, I am having this kind of struggle. One interesting conversation I had with a friend who's really, really high up in a company. And she was like, I'm not like an entrepreneur or anything, like I don't know. Like, and long story short, she's at EY. So a woman partner at EY told me this,
Which is amazing.
which is crazy. And I was like, there's still only a fraction of the partner population that is female. By you being there, you're setting up yourself as a role model. And two, one of the things that I've learned through entrepreneurship is just being frank with your team and being honest with your team. Because one of the things about her is her husband is a stay-at-home dad. And she was like, it's hard for me to tell other people about my success because, I have a stay-at-home dad as, my partner. So like other people won't take that seriously. But I'm like, that was hard too. There was some other background story behind it, but I was like, that in itself was hard because of the circumstances that you were in. And also, I think it's more helpful to explain that story and tell people like what you had to go through to get to the point you are. And being a female partner at a large corporation like that, you're still a minority, you're still setting up an example. And tell people how you got there. Don't discount how you got there just because you think your husband was a stay-at-home dad. Like, I don't want to get into someone's personal life, but there was a lot more to that.
Yeah, it's just an example of getting real with somebody, having that tribe where you can share those things. And, you encouraged her to look at herself differently. And even absolutely, she has a purpose in being there as a partner. But, the higher purpose truly is to be there as an example and a role model and a trailblazer for other women. So I just love it. Well, tell me, what do you believe is the something extra that every leader needs?
I think leading through vulnerability and building trust that way is absolutely necessary and the way for companies to build teams in the future. The old way of doing it where you're hiding your emotions makes the situation worse over time.
Well, tell our listeners how they can find their handbag, that you'll only need this handbag. Tell them how they can find you, how they can learn more about Lux Nyx. And, if you could tell them that, that'd be awesome before we sign off here.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just visit our website at luxandnyx.com. So it's luxandnyx.com.
Awesome. And then you're on LinkedIn, right, Lisa? So they could connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Yep.
This has been so much fun. Thanks again, Lisa, for being on the show. I can't wait to see where Lux Nyx goes. You've got a fantastic story, a fantastic product, and I just wish you great, great success.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You're amazing. I'm a big fan of you too.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.